Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. In fact, just while you're on that point, the audience that we have here today are members and guests of the Project Management Institute chapter here in Canberra. And we're all keen on doing our projects better and getting any little tool or tip or that bit of advice that can help us be successful in our everyday endeavours. And audience, please out there, we've got the chat line. I failed to say this. We've got a chat line available in Zoom, and Niranjan Gaikwad is here to help me monitor any questions that you might have or comments that you'd like, because we wanted to keep this as a very dynamic and very interactive presentation. One of the things that John said to me is that we could do a presidential style discussion, or presentation, which John would just be talking to you for 30 minutes. But if you haven't gathered already, it's going to be much more of a conversation, dialogue between myself and John. And if you have any questions, to just let Niranjan know or let me know through the chat, and we can interject as we go along. One of the things that I was preparing with John before is that there's just so many pointers on how to communicate better and be effective in our communication with our stakeholders. And even now in the virtual world, they even hold much more relevance than before. But when you're talking to people, John, one of the things I find is, how do you know that people are really understanding what you're saying? How do you get honest feedback? I mean, the worst thing we can have is when we think we've had a good communication, but our audience or our stakeholders we've communicated to don't really believe so, but they haven't told us.
Look, I think it's a simple answer. If there's one word I could eradicate from the English dictionary, Lewis, would be the word presentation. Not that there's anything wrong with the word, but I think over the last at least 20 years, and especially with the likes of what I call corporate culture communications, where if I ask of you, or I ask of any of your audience today to give can I use the word presentation in the boardroom? The first thing we do, and I'm talking the majority, not all, but the first thing that the majority do is they think, well, what is it that I'm going to say? What is it that I've got to get across? What is the data? What is the information? What is the logic? What are the ideas? And we start to build these PowerPoints or decks or slides or visual aids. Most of the time, that's nothing more than our own, as the presenter, our own notes. So to answer your question about people's level of understanding when we're sharing information, especially new ideas, look, Lewis, just last week, I'm actually meeting with them again after this call. I'm working with an engineering company, and I won't say the name, but they're international. And last week, and some of their senior people, there's no one younger than 40 years of age, and they've developed this corporate communication culture, very intelligent people. But here's the idea. Because I'm training them, they had to each give a 10 to 12 minute presentation. Now, here's the irony. They put their slides together. No one asked for slides. They thought you had to have slides. They cut themselves off from the screen to share their screen. There was no whites of the eyes. There was no interaction using facial body language, more emphasis with tone. And here's the point I wanted to make. One of the gentlemen, probably 45, 47 years of age, similar to myself, he came to the table, or at least to the Zoom call, with 18 PowerPoint slides in 12 minutes.
Wow.
Now, hang on. What happened, Lewis, is he powered through his slides. Ding, 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 ding. This is so normal. And sometimes I feel like what I'm saying should be so kindergarten. It should be so vanilla. We should have learned these basics back in the day. However, it's fascinating how corporate communication culture seems to have eradicated the basics. So this gentleman powered through 18 slides, and the first point of feedback that he gained from his peers and his CEO was, you didn't stop once to allow us to talk with you or to engage or to understand where we're at in the process, et cetera, et cetera. So he thought he had done a great job of presenting his points. And so the last thing I'll say in response to your question about getting some interaction. And see, why I said I like to eradicate the word presentation, Lewis, is because of what that, you know, stirs in the mind. I'd rather just use the word have a yarn, have a chat, have a conversation, for goodness sakes.
Excellent.
So this particular gentleman was absolutely convinced that his slides were clear and his information was, I suppose, compelling. So I said to the other peers and his CEO, I said, this particular gentleman, I won't say his name, this particular gentleman only presented about 4 or 5 minutes ago. Can anyone tell me what was on slide 6? Not one person got it right. And they're all intelligent people, all very well trained. I said, can anyone tell me what was on slide 9? Not one person got it right. I said, can anyone tell me what was on slide 12? One person got it right. And that made the point. I don't need to say any more.
Excellent. No, yes, we've all been, well, not all of us, but I believe a lot of us would have been, death by PowerPoint. I've experienced that. I've actually delivered that. So I'm as guilty as anybody else. John, we've actually got a few questions coming through already. One from Kathy Tran. How do you break down resistance from stakeholders?
Kathy, how are you? And thanks for your question. Thanks for being with us. So how do you break down... You're welcome. So Kathy, how do you break down resistance from stakeholders? Kathy, if you're able to answer, can you give me an example of what you mean?
I'm involved in a project with federal government and state government. State government had data of their own to do with a national screening register, and they've merged to a product that is managed by Commonwealth. So there's always been resistance from states and territory stakeholders who say, well, we've signed up on this new product. You guys are managing our data, but now we can't get anything out of it. So I think historically there's been, I guess, a negative feeling towards the product and the management of their data. Hence, bringing them on board has been quite challenging. It's been met with a lot of opposition and negativity. So I guess when you have any product releases that comes out, it's always negative. And when we go to management board, again, a lot of their feedback has been very negative. So it's been very hard to turn that ship. So I guess I'm just seeking your experience and how do you go about communicating or bringing them back on board when historically they've had a bad experience with the product?
Yeah, look, Kathy, that's a great example and I appreciate it. It helps me to not go off track. So you've already hit the nail on the head 3 times, Kathy, in your response to my question. You've used the words negative feeling, i.e. the client or the stakeholders. You've mentioned the word feeling. You've mentioned the word negative another 2 times. Kathy, I know I'm asking the obvious, especially on a 7:30 or thereabouts in the morning for you. But what are you talking about here? Are you talking about intelligence or intellect? Let's use the word intellect. Or they have an issue with emotion. Tell me whether you think it's intellect or emotion. And you've already said the answer 3 times.
Yeah, it's emotion. Because you know, these medical practitioners with extent, I suppose part of the reason is that probably they hadn't felt engaged in the process. Yeah, so I guess from that perspective, they feel like they haven't been involved, and when they are involved in you know, product showcases, example, it just seems like it's a tick in the box more or less, rather than genuinely you know, leaning on their expertise, mind you, because we're not doing the delivery, but certainly I guess that's where I'm seeing the problem.
Kathy, I like to say this, that our job is, I'm gonna eliminate the word for this conversation, eliminate the word presentation. Our job as reasonable, professional, responsible communicators and or conversationalists is obviously not to win all people all of the time, but more people more of the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And look, because I come from an engineering background, going back to 1989, did my studies, worked in that world, listened to every type of technical and engineering type presentation. You probably know better than I that I would say that on a good day, 80% of all the presentations I witnessed in my engineering career, which lasted 7 years, only 7 years, they were about 90% dominant with what I call IQ. I call it better terminology is intellect. You might say to me, well, John, that's going back to 1996. What about something more relevant? Well, it's amazing, after training 7,000 people, and a lot of those companies are engineering-based, project management-based, technically biased. It fascinates me, Kathy, how many times I see 80 to 90%, sometimes more, 80 to 90% of the majority, not all, the majority of presentations are just ticking boxes, intellect, and here are the multiple intellectual points you will listen to because I'm presenting at you. I'm giving an example. But what fascinates me, Kathy, is you said another interesting word, and that was the word that the client or the audience or the stakeholders didn't feel engaged, correct?
Correct.
Kathy, engaged, emotional or logical?
Again, that's emotional.
So what you're really discussing is go on, you were going to say, Kathy?
No, I was going to say, I suppose the paradigm here is we all know, the benefits of the product and so forth. But I guess I think a lot of people buying is about their emotional engagement to it. And in some ways, I feel like human beings, individuals, we do have sort of an ego stroke about ourselves. So I think not feeling valued, whether it's being a participant or in its input, is probably causing a lot of the disengagement, should I say. Yeah.
Well, Kathy, look, and I'm not suggesting anything simple, but I do think we as responsible, professional communicators can make things more simple for our audience or audiences. Everything that you've talked about is pretty much emotionally biased. And therefore, Kathy, are you aware of, I know that this is quite simple, are you aware of what is considered a healthy balance of intellect versus emotion in all communication? What percentage would you give to intellect and what percentage would you give to emotion?
I'd say 70-30. So 70 emotional and 30 intellect.
So you've done this before. So let me ask you a question. What percentage would you say of your organizations or your team's attempts thus far with the audience, they haven't engaged, the audience feels negative about the past and that system. What percentage of prior communications to that particular audience, what percent has been intellect versus emotion, Kathy?
I think those figures would be inverted. And again, that's probably symptomatic of project delivery. You just try to hit those strides and milestones and just try and get that task done. So yeah.
Kathy, I was working with a building manager of a Southeast Asia Pacific wide engineering company, and this particular gentleman, Steve, I won't say any more, but about his name. He was the building manager for New South Wales at the time. Steve, that's all I'll say. And he was looking from the board, he was looking for $2 million. This is a few years ago, looking for $2 million to inject or to implement a brand new technology system to make life for him and his team and also his clients much easier. Does this make sense? Mm. He targeted the board twice, and he contacted me and said, John, he said, can you please meet me at my office in Sydney? He said, because I've spoken with the board, I apologize, I've presented to the board. It's interesting that, not a conversation. I presented to the board twice and they've knocked me back twice, and yet I don't understand. This is an amazing opportunity. It's an amazing product. It's an amazing solution. I said, Steve, let's meet for a coffee. So we met at a coffee shop in the centre of Sydney. And I said, Steve, tell me about the product. And he pulled out almost a brochure, Kathy, and you know that was just ticking boxes. I said, no, Steve, I didn't ask for the brochure. I want you to talk to me about the project. Kathy, this guy lit up like a Christmas tree. His eyes, I think his hair was standing on end. He was so enthusiastic about this product. And he was telling me all the reasons why he was convinced, and the examples and the testimonies and the case studies, and similar companies has helped. And one of his competitors has just started using it. I said, stop, Steve, after about 20 minutes. How much of this emotion have you shared with the board versus your PowerPoint presentations just ticking boxes? He said, John, I think I know where you're going to. I'll keep a long story short, Kathy. He pulled the PowerPoint down, deleted the slides, went back for a third attempt, and just gave case studies and reasons and commercial benefits why, and communicated the emotional reasons to the business and their clients as to why to embrace this product. Guess what happened on third attempt, Kathy?
They swung around.
He got the $2 million.
Yeah.
Do I need to say more?
No, not at all.
Any other thoughts, Kathy?
I think your example is self-evident. So yes, thank you.
Great, thank you, Kathy.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for getting involved in this question.